This is the OverReaction podcast.
Jamie.
Jeremy.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So how you been?
I'm great. I was actually thinking about Jeremy. How long have I known you now? It's been.
I think
15,
it was pretty
years.
Close from the IDX GE
Right.
deal. No, think about where IDX would have been. I know we're not going to cast shade on because all the people that did the stuff at GE are all gone or whatever, but think about if IDX would have stayed independent.
Yes, I have thought about that because a number of my enterprise clients are now on Epic. So I have.
I mean,
and you know what?
In my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
CareCast was the best product.
Thank you. That was my product.
And even ImageCast was.
ImageCast too.
Yeah. I mean, IDX was fantastic. It was so good. I thought it was best in class.
I would agree. And the two founders, well, Jim Crook and Rich Tarrant were phenomenal leaders. Absolutely, hands down, phenomenal leaders. And they were both kind of yin and yang, and they ran the business really, really well.
IDX, did you guys have ambulatory?
We did, but more on the practice management side. CareCast was building out some of those capabilities, but when you might even remember that IDX had acquired a company called Famous. So Famous had the enterprise clinical financial system. And so when we were acquired by IDX, we had to reconcile some of the product roadmap across the organization when it came to ambulatory, because IDX had relationships with other vendors to fulfill kind of the clinical aspect of an ambulatory EMR.
That's right.
We had some very interesting product roadmap conversations and kind of sorting through, let alone just brand aspects. But we did. And I think that we had a really, really strong portfolio, which was attractive to GE, especially on the enterprise EMR side, because you had Epic really coming up at that point. You know, they had the relationship with Kaiser to build their inpatient. You might remember that when that first started. You had Cerner, who had a good portion of the market share. By the way, I really wish Neil Patterson was still around to kind of keep the checks and balances, if you know what I mean. It would have made the competition, I think, more interesting today. But yeah, GE had acquired us to help on that front on really kind of rounding out their portfolio.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I like throwing hand grenades in rooms, then walking away. So, from a conversational perspective, not a literal perspective, I guess I have to clarify that these days. The ability for people not to understand nuance and humor and subtlety is gone. People take things literally. Not you. I just mean people might be listening to this. So where do you think we would be in an industry today if there was no high-tech act and no meaningful use that came out? That the industry just kept hospitals, clinics, and the vendors just did it with no outside involvement?
That's a really good question, because with high tech and meaningful use and putting incentives in place to facilitate more adoption of technology, I don't know. I mean, on one hand, I can see the value of doing that because we needed to really digitize paper records. There was a problem. I mean, that IOM report that came out, you might remember that. I think that was like 1998. I mean, I'm dating myself at this point. But how many medical mistakes were happening inside the walls of a health system, right? And so how do you correct that when some of them might be paper-based and you're trying to get health systems to adopt technology to do that? And it's not always an easy thing. And I think meaningful use helped to spur that. I think where meaningful use likely went wrong was the influence of EMR vendors on what are the criteria. Obviously, interoperability, those sorts of things. And so I think that might have steered it in a way that we didn't necessarily mean for it. I've even heard people talk about meaningful abuse, not meaningful use. So there's probably a reason for that. But it was there to help encourage adoption of technology that I think is important. And now we're in a state of what technology is actually helpful that doesn't get in the way of the patient-provider relationship, and create more work for physicians who are like exiting care in droves at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, and you probably already know what I think. So, I'm more libertarian at heart. So I just remember being back 2003, 2004, 2005, 6, whatever, before it happened. And I would call a lot of CIOs for research, like lots. And it was pretty rare to come across a hospital that didn't have some sort of plan to put something in place. They weren't moving it as quickly as people would like. So I just think about all the other technological innovations that we love, that just everybody uses. And I can't backtrack it to the government coming in and saying, you have to do this, and here's how to do it. And we're going to give you a bunch of incentives, or we're going to, just the way meaningful use happens. So I've just kind of looked at it. So I'm very skeptical. I look at it and said, I bet today, without it, given the adoption of all the other technology around it, that things would have taken certainly longer, but would be in a much better place. Interoperability probably would have been closer. The sheer amount that the big enterprise companies could have charged would have not been there. And so that would have, you'd have been more, you'd had a lot more, I think, startups that would be successful in it. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea that the government comes in, like Medicare, Medicaid, and whatever, and they say, hey, FYI, by this point in time, this information needs to be submitted to us in this format according to HIPAA, or you're not going to get paid. Too bad. But it didn't go through and say, your orders have to be like this, and your charting has to be exactly like this, and all this stuff that conveniently mapped to just a couple companies that are now multi-billion, and they're kind of de facto controlling healthcare. And because they're now the big mega gatekeeper that exists within health systems, and now some of them are going after the health plans, that it is become a choke point of innovation. It's not fostering innovation. So it feels to me like Windows 95 and Internet Explorer, where it was like, hang on a second, if they get to control the full desktop and anything that goes on with it, and anywhere you go to the internet, that it could have a massive chilling effect on innovation. And I'm like, we've kind of let that happen now in healthcare, because I look at things and people say, yeah, but we needed to get it digitized, kind of like you said. And I go, okay, cool. So hospital and clinic operating margin should be so much better. Nope, not even close. So patients should be much healthier. Outcomes should be much better. Not even close. So physicians, nurses should be so much happier and better. Not even close. So that's what I look at. We spent how much money? We got it digital. And now what are the big healthcare outcomes, financial outcomes, operational outcomes?
I don't know that we can point to big.
Well, that's my point.
Right.
That's my point. And that's when I go, that's a lot of money to have access to data. And now it's like, well, now that we have the data digitized, now we can, all this AI can come at it. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's true. I talked to a hospital CIO, and he was describing, and they're an Epic shop. He was describing all this new cool stuff. And it wasn't Epic. It was talking about how they're putting in, they have ambient listening. And then they were doing some things in RevCycle with autonomous coding and other kind of stuff like that. And I'm sitting there listening, and I'm like, so, hey, it's fascinating. You just described all these cool new tools so they don't have to interact with Epic directly. Huh. Okay. Like, so it's just this interesting thing. So I'm not anti-Epic. Epic has done an exceptional job. They really have. Like, how do you
got to give them credit for that?
Oh, for sure. But it's like, health plans, hospitals, et cetera, should be the primary decider. They should be able to say, we're doing this too bad. And not Epic, and nobody else should frankly be able to say, well, no, you should wait for this. And they kind of tacitly block information going back and forth. They're just, I don't know about block, kind of make things harder, cost more for those integrations, all this stuff, which, like it or not, that's going to stop innovation adoption. It just is. A hospital's going to say, we'd love to go. DexCare, I would love to do it, but we got this upgrade, they're putting this in, all these extra costs. Like,
and by the way, every digital health company, nearly every digital health company is facing that. I mean, if you just look at, there's been a lot of surveys done around this with the innovative digital companies coming that are, new entrants to the marketplace that are trying to solve specific problems or take on a certain workflow. And that's their top concern is around that is the integration with these bigger systems or making space for them, because the bigger systems are going to promise that, well, hey, we'll do that in a year or 2 years. So just hold off on implementing that. And they make it very, very challenging. And by the way, I've been on both sides. I mean, I worked for our vendor and then spent the last half of my health tech career working with more of the smaller companies that are solving big workflow challenges, but for all intents and purposes is kind of adjacent to these EMRs. And I like to say that they help to extend or extract value of the big systems that you put in place, but the reality is you have to have the integration points in, and that's difficult. I don't care how much interoperability focus people claim to have and push and back, and we're supportive of it. They make it very, very challenging to do that.
Yeah. I just don't want to see the government step in, in 5 years, like if Epic controls 75% of the market, they become the de facto monopoly. And then there's lawsuits that are going to keep creeping up. And then finally it's going to get to the Department of Justice or FTC or whatever. And they're going to say, we've never taken an action on a private company before, but we're going to have to step in. And because I don't think it'll be even handed, I think they could come up and break up Epic or put in some really draconian things to make sure this doesn't happen again and that it hurts once again. So I'm hopeful that Epic would say, you know what, we're not going to pick winners and losers anymore. We're going to be 100% interoperability. We're not going to favor these vendors over these vendors. That's not our job.
Right.
That's the hospital's job. We do this, and then I wouldn't say level the playing field. Epic shouldn't have to say we're going to dumb things down and make it easier for other people. To just say stop blocking it.
Right.
Like exactly. Zero friction on interoperability. Get rid of that completely, and no predatory pricing, all that other kind of stuff. Make it like a free open market and let everyone go. Because my concern is if they don't, then Big Brother, Big Sister is going to step in, and they never have a nice subtle touch.
No, they don't.
So I started us off just it was so heavy. Wow, that got depressing fast. Like, where are you going with this? So any you're going to HIMSS, right? Any other big trade shows you're going to?
Vive?
JP Morgan or Vive?
Vive. Well, we have our co-founders are at JP Morgan this week. And then we have Vive coming up, HIMSS, Health Evolution Summit, Scottsdale Institute Annual Conference. I mean, it is conference season. But I get excited about, Jeremy, because I think about what works in healthcare when you are trying to engage with buyers, and as a marketer, I'm constantly thinking about that. Though I have long-standing relationships with a lot of health system executives, just because I've been in this space for 25 years. But events, I love the in-person events of seeing people and the relationships, because there's one truth in healthcare marketing specifically, and that is trust and the relationships that you have. So we are in high season, coming into high season for events. I'm excited about that, and kind of what the discussions are going to be.
So is Vive the pre-HIMSS thing?
What do you mean pre-HIMSS? No, they're separate. So Vive is kind of, I believe, is what Chime used to be.
Yeah. So I know that Chime did like a forum right before HIMSS in the same location. They'd say, hey, yeah, HIMSS is going to start here. We're going to do this pre-2-day thing. So is Vive like totally separate?
I believe it is.
Place?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep.
Have you gone to Vive?
I have.
What do you think?
I like it.
I've heard really mixed stuff.
Look, I think that the content, the sessions are really well done. You get a lot of the kind of forward-thinking health system executives that are there, interesting conversations. I tend to like that event. I know that there's mixed opinions about it, but
yeah, I've just heard a lot of our other customers that went there and they're like, it's hard to find a buyer. There seem to be tons of finance people. They said it was almost like JP Morgan meets high-end CES AWS conference thing. And so you're like,
maybe, but isn't healthcare like that though too? A little bit.
Well, isn't health Vive? No, okay. So I'm talking health. I'm talking health.
You're describing health.
I'm totally off. I have heard good things about Vive because that's the CIO chime thing. I've heard good things about Vive. Health is not. People haven't been super excited about the ROI when they came away from health. They said it was very slick, super glitzy, looked amazing. But they're like, yeah, we'll probably send 1 or 2 people. We can't ever do a booth there again. Like, we'll send a couple people for the sessions, but it's hard to understand who the buyers are. Like, if you're a private equity guy or a venture capital, what an awesome show to go to.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, then it seems kind of hard to figure out where does it fit.
And we go to Vive. We don't exhibit at Vive.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, at Health. And you're getting me tripped up. At Health,
well, it's the same group. Health does Vive. They're the same people. They just
right. Mm-hmm. But I think that they differentiate along those lines.
Yeah. I'll be at HIMSS. I'm going back. I'm still kind of mad at those suckers.
Why?
What they did a few years back. Oh, they just added the blue. Like, not too bad. You're not getting your money back. We'll put 50%.
Oh yeah, during the pandemic.
I was all fired up. Like, I was so mad. I could just. So I went back one time. This will be my second time in 5 years, but it's been Vegas. So I'm going to drive down, do some of this in, red
for you
country, and then hit the show.
Yeah, I haven't been in several years. I took a 5-year break from healthcare, and so I got out of that whole circle.
Yeah, that was Dreambox, right?
To Dreambox, EdTech. So a lot of parallels there, and then went into MarTech for a little while. And then
that's right. Yeah.
Got back into it. I think I missed everybody.
Tell me about the EdTech thing. Like, I mean, it is similar because I think there's higher ed or ed seems to have some of the same dysfunction as healthcare does. But what was that like?
Oh, well, it was so up until that point, my entire career has been in healthcare technology.
Yeah.
I even did medical device for a tiny bit, but it's been health tech. When I went into ed tech, well, number one, you just have to put your parent hat on, and then you can figure out a lot of things because we know how schools operate. We know how districts operate because we're parents and we have to navigate that all the time with our kids. My son was also using the product that Box had. So K-8 digital math program. Actually, it was founded by a former Microsoft engineer who had worked with Peter Newport. If you remember.
Where is Peter now?
I talk to him every now and again. I see him at Health Evolution, but he resides on a number of boards, and he's living his life. Travels a lot. Good for him.
So he's like, but he must work for like a PE firm or something.
Not directly for a PE firm, but he sits on a number of boards.
Okay. Cool. I'll have to reach out to him.
But it's like these little points of connectedness that we have. And so, but Dreambox was acquired by Reed Hastings in 2018, and they went and kind of changed their business strategy from B2C to B2B. Anyways, similarities is you're selling either to a large school district, or at times you can go into a school itself, sell, and then expand. And so there's a lot of similarities from a marketer's perspective, a lot of similarities in terms of the sales cycle and how you sell and buying committees and how you influence. the added component to it is the parent, because the parent is also ensuring that their child is using the platform from home. But there's a lot of interesting parallels. I mean, you have federal and state standards that you have to abide by to make sure that kids are actually learning. You can kind of equate that to pieces of legislation, either at the state or federal level on patient care. You can go after grant money to help fund different types of programming. So there's a lot of parallels. The only thing that's different is you got to get to know who the players are, but the industry operates very similarly. What I loved about Dreambox, though, Jeremy, is that, and one of the reasons that I stayed in healthcare for so long, is the whole idea of personalized care or personalized medicine. And so the beauty of Dreambox is it was personalized learning. And what it was doing was using kind of machine learning on how the child is solving math problems.
Wow.
A lot of data on that, and then preparing a learning pathway for the student so that they become proficient in the standards of math according to the standards that they have to meet. And so a lot of the pathways were geared towards how the child solves math problems, and then how do you get them to a place where they're becoming both confident in math and competent. And so I like the parallel of personalized learning, personalized medicine, for that very reason. You got to treat the person. You got to treat the person, because there's so many, even if they fit within a cohort of, let's just say a disease or a chronic disease or something, there's still nuances about that person that you have to take into consideration. So I loved it. It also happened to be at the time where a year later after I joined, the pandemic happened. And so that's when you started to see flaws in the education system. But Dreambox was well positioned to kind of come in, because kids were, now learning from home, as we're all, familiar with, and have probably a little PTSD around too, but having at least still an ability for kids to learn, because we were online, we're digital, we kept learning going. And at that point, it was just simply making sure that we could pivot into the homes of the kids and not having to do it in the classroom. So that was kind of interesting.
And what kind of dysfunction, do you see any similarities in dysfunction between higher ed and, hospitals, for example?
I think that there's always going to be some level of bureaucracy and some level of politics within a buying committee of what people may want or not want. I think that you also have varying degrees of opinions on, should kids even be on computers? How much time should they be doing that? Are they actually learning, or is it just gamification? I mean, that Minecraft has its own educational platform too, but sometimes you go, oh, are they really learning, or are they just playing games? And so I think there was a little bit of a stigma of how much time kids were spending on technology in the first place, but there's no way of getting around that. I mean, it's rare that they even have books anymore, study books, lesson books, everything is online. So I think there was a little bit of that. Of course, going after funding, where's the funding going to come from to support an initiative like this? So there's a lot of different like internal conflict and tension that arises during a sale like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the camp. My kids are older now, so they're all graduated from college, et cetera. But there is a legitimate concern about kids having too much screen time, and I don't think that's even. I think outside of kids that have like serious autism, because for them being online, we have some family members, not in my immediate family, but related family do. And those iPads, et cetera, are like godsends to bringing those kids that have autism out. Like it's kind of remarkable. But the problem is then it's every kid's on their screen 6 to 10 hours a day. And I think it kind of jams up there, because humans were meant to be, we're holistic. It's the environment around us and everything. It isn't, anytime we get into a pattern of, I just do these one or two things every day, all day, you kind of limit your growth. Like everything kind of slows down. I know for me, one of the reasons I mountain bike a lot, when I go mountain biking, I don't do a Strava thing. I don't track anything. I don't care about what my heart rate is. I don't care how many miles, how many calories, my VO2 max. I literally don't care about any of it. I don't listen to music. And I do think what's crazy, I think people that go out and run by themselves or go hiking or biking by themselves, listen to music, that is dangerous, dangerous stuff. Like, I'm going to go nuts. Like you can't be aware of what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, that is bananas to me. Like, I see this, I'm probably going to come across sexist, but I'll be out there riding out in the nowhere and there'll be a woman by herself and she's out there running or biking and she's listening. I'm like, and I can't say anything. It's not my place to say anything. I'm like, you're crazy.
Yeah. No,
You are turning off your radar
mm-hmm.
to anything that's going to go around you.
Well, whether it's the making yourself more susceptible to being attacked by a human, it could even be, I know this sounds crazy, but even an animal. I mean, I live outside of Seattle, 25 miles outside of Seattle, and we have a lot of trails. Well, we also have bears, we have coyotes, we have mountain lions, we have other protected lands. And so you're going to see naturally some of that. So I would agree with that. I never wear my headphones, and I'm outdoors quite a bit, unless I'm in my neighborhood or at the gym. But if I go out on a trail and do a hike, no, I need to be aware of my surroundings for sure.
Yeah, in a gym, I don't want to hear anybody. Like if I go to a gym, like I'm not here to talk to anyone. I don't want to look at you. I don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Like, I'm there to do it.
Yeah. Same here. It's not a social place for me.
But out on a trail in the wilderness or hiking, walking around, like running, you just don't, from a pure save yourself perspective from the more dangerous human predators out there. I had one time where I was tracked by a mountain lion.
Exactly.
And I grew up out in the country, so I knew I could hear it. I'm like, that's not a deer, because deer will keep going. You can hear but a mountain lion makes a very, very different. It's tracking you, or not even tracking to kill necessarily, thankfully, but it's easy to tell. And if I would have had it on, never in a million years would have known that was actually happening. But for me, even more than the safety perspective, it's getting back to the learning. I noticed that when I get outside, I'm not listening to music, I'm not listening to podcasts, I'm just in nature. You kind of almost go into a Zen state, almost like not a dream, but it unclogs all the crap that I was doing in the office. I got this call, got to get to this RFP, got to get to this demo, got to get this podcast. And kind of your creativity, productivity gets all jammed up. Like you can't, it's all trying to get through a narrow passageway. And when I go out and just ride and I'm not listening to music and I'm just going, stuff starts to click. All of a sudden, all these ideas, and it's not the riding that did it, it's getting away, unplugging, and all of a sudden the log jam clears up, and I have consistently my best ideas for the business and my life, et cetera, when I do that. It's kind of like, I don't want to get biblical, but you think at times in the Bible, like the prophets or the rulers, whatever, go in the wilderness. They were always talking about that. There's something about you just got to get away. And so for kids, it's, you got to unplug, get out, touch grass. So I take a lot of kids rappelling, not alone. I have other adult leaders with us, but we'll get them rappelling. We get them out canyoneering. We get them out mountain biking, hiking. And everywhere we go, there's no cell phones because it can't connect. And it's amazing what happens to them. You see them start engaging with each other. You see them start talking about stuff. And all of a sudden now they're this open vessel to be able to be mentored and taught. We need
more of that, Jeremy. I feel like we've lost that. When you think about kids today, and a lot of their social outlet is gaming online with each other and not out building relationships. That seems to be the norm, at least with the parents that I speak with. Even if they're in sporting events, they tend to still do that. I mean, my son doesn't do it as much just because I don't think he enjoys that, but he's certainly involved in sports. He gets up every morning and he runs on his own an hour before he even needs to.
That's great.
And so he's got a lot of good discipline. And I think we need to start instilling that more into kids because they need that fresh air and that exposure without the technology in front of them. I do worry about what it's doing to mental health, what it's doing to their ability to think critically and to be focused. I think technology has made us even worse at at multitasking. And worse, what I mean by that is we do too much of it. I mean, I don't even know how people work with multiple screens. You might. I don't. I have one screen. If I had multiple screens, I think my brain would be all over the place. But yeah, we're doing a disservice. I think we need to bring back more of the adventure side of kids being outside. And I don't think you're going to have parents, argue against that. But I think the pandemic, it did a disservice and an injustice to our kids when they were forced to just interact, and then it just kind of kept going on that.
Yeah, it is increased. I think during the pandemic, it revealed a certain kind of drama addiction and fear addiction that exists. I'm not a fan of using fear as a motivator. I think that's I'm not, like Yoda talked about. He talked like fear leads to all the problems, like fear leads to da. And that's the issue. If you're afraid, you're willing to put up with things and you're willing to do things that you normally would never, ever do. And so I'm very much using anything for fear to try to motivate change, because it doesn't. Fear doesn't motivate almost any lasting change, right? Because it's not a particularly good emotion. I mean, it's supposed to be used for true danger, not every little thing now. Like Gavin DeBecker wrote a great book called The Gift of Fear that talked about how many people, in terms of not wanting to seem impolite, will get attacked. And he's specifically talking about women, like, hey, you shouldn't worry about being polite or screaming or yelling. No. The second you feel nervous, you shouldn't worry about, well, how's someone going to take this as I'm like, walking out in the street. Like, no, trust that fear factor. But the problem is now we're like everything. Let's be afraid of everything. And when these kids and people have so much screen time, they're kind of giving themselves anesthesia for the feeling. I want to get rid of that. Like, no, pay attention to how you're feeling.
Right.
You need to pay. I mean, we're trying to hire. I don't know about you. We try to hire younger people out of college while they're in college, pay them a lot of money, way, way more than we would pay normally. We can't get them because the second it's, hang on a second, I got to get on the phone with somebody. Like, yeah, you might have to talk to.
Do I actually have to talk to someone?
These aren't sales calls, Jamie. These are, I just have to set up an appointment, or I need to walk somebody through or do like a training. Like, we had the training modules. Yeah, you need to get them trained on the platform, and they're like, whoa. And I tell these guys, I mentor, like I said, a lot of the youth, and I tell them, hey, if you're going into like blue collar skilled labor, you're golden. There's jobs forever. If you're going white collar, you're going to be a programmer. You want to be an accountant. You want to be a lawyer. You want to be all this other kind of stuff. You had better work your tail off and care and be passionate, creative, because you'll do well. AI will help you. If you're not that passionate, you're not that hardworking, you're not that creative, 10 years from now, I don't know what jobs will be for you.
That's the truth.
And some of the most well-adjusted people that I talk to, of the younger people, that they're in their mid to late 20s, are really well-adjusted. They're all guys that are doing welding, plumbing, electricians. Seriously, it's nuts. You talk to the 26-year-old guy who's a plumber, and he's as mature as the 36-year-old white collar millennial.
Absolutely.
It's bananas. Yeah. It is crazy, the maturation difference.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it too. And I have a good portion of my family are blue collar workers.
That's awesome.
And, I'm actually glad to see the trades, picking up some steam again, where college may not be the pathway for everyone, and they may not want that. Great, because we need more people in trades. And by the way, they're crushing it.
They're crushing
it. They're doing really, really well. Really,
you have some of these guys that are electricians, and we have friends, electrician, welder, plumber, something else, and they're 30 years old, 31. They've been doing it for like 8-9 years. the lowest ones make 120 grand a year. Another one's making 180 to 200,000. He's like, I don't have some big company. I've hired a couple people. That's it. And because I love it. Like,
I believe it when I pay, when I have to bring an electrician out or anything else. I mean, I'm like, are you kidding me?
I know. And it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better.
I don't have that skill, so I guess I need to pay for it.
I know. This is fun. You know me, I'm going to get off on a lot of different tangents. So getting back into marketing.
Yeah.
Because I think I've told you before, in companies, I see marketing, like the head of marketing is more like the adult supervision. They're the adult in the room. They're the customer whisperer and the market whisperer, because it's just because that made sense to you. How is that going to resonate? How is that going to play? Right? How is that going to be consumed or interpreted? So what have you seen? Like, what's the best practices when it comes to marketing in the B2B space that you're in? Not consumer. I don't understand the consumer space. To me, even asking questions, I wouldn't have a clue. But I have pretty strong opinions about marketing, especially as I look at their interviews. I look at their stuff at their booths. I look at their marketing messaging, and I'll hold back, but I'd like to get your perspective on it.
Oh boy, I've got a lot of opinions about that. But let me address something that you said first, which was the various roles that a really good marketer plays.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we do. I mean, I sometimes believe that we don't get the credit that we've earned and how much that we have to retain and bring to the table and how much that we can. Because you got to remember, we're informing a lot of different parts of the organization. I mean, whether it's bringing in requirements and voice of customer to product on how do we make sure that we keep competitive and we're adding value and extending value to our customers, to now how sophisticated marketing has become and the alignment with sales around go-to-market. I mean, there's just so much information. Yeah. And in the last, I would say 15 years, we've had, with all of the rise in digital marketing, the vast amount of data and information that we have and how much you have to keep in your brain to understand what's going on with consumer behavior and how's this channel performing. And I mean, it is daunting, Jeremy. I mean, I just came up on my 30th year since my first out of college, corporate job. I've been doing this for 30 years, and the evolution of marketing, while some of the foundational things have remained true, the sophistication of our practice, if you will, has grown exponentially. And it's, the amount of information. And so I don't think that we always give credit to marketers who are trying to retain that and make sure that we are operating on all cylinders, because especially in healthcare, where you have, very long sales cycles, 12 to 18 months. You have, if it's an enterprise sale and not just departmental technology, you are marketing and selling to different types of buyers within a committee, and then they have their own internal politics, and they probably have 50 different initiatives going on, and you're trying to get them to prioritize yours because you're going to add value. The way in which we have to go in and make sure that we're influencing and persuading people along a buyer journey is very complicated and sophisticated. So we've got a lot of, channels in which we can do that. And so I would say, all of that aside, in healthcare specifically, because I know we like to say that we're unique and whatever. And I think to some degree we kind of are, but one thing or a couple of things that I've learned in my 30 years in this space is that the relationship that you have with your customer and the amount of weight that their referral and their recommendation carries is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. Because one health system, when they're looking for a solution, they're going to go to their peer group and ask, I've got this problem. What are you using? and your customers better be talking to you. So there's like just these fundamental truths that still exist. I don't care how sophisticated your digital marketing program is in making sure that you got brand awareness and good air cover and all of these things that are important. The reality is this: if the chief transformation officer at customer A is not out singing our praises and speaking about us in a favorable way because they're getting value, it makes the sales process very, very challenging.
Oh yeah, for sure. So what do you see? What are the misconceptions about marketing, especially from other leaders in companies? And why do they not see? Because too many of them don't see marketing as being they're like, it's important, but it's not like mission critical. We don't really need. We have a couple customers that don't have a true chief marketing officer, and I can tell you they're the hardest companies to work with by far.
Yeah,
we're having to reiterate, like, yeah, okay, I can see what you're talking about, but hey, maybe in that message, like, why are you writing a sentence in the subject line? Like, what are you trying? Like, what are you doing? Or, hey, that's not gonna work. Like, where do you see that coming from? And if there's a really good chief marketing officer who has the backing of, is truly strategic, truly in the executive team, CEO trusts that person really, really well, things go, the company is almost every time does better, just does. They're more successful.
Yeah, I believe that for a couple of different reasons. One, well, let me first answer your question. Like, what are the misconceptions about marketing? One is we just care about our logo and our design. The second is we act as a support organization to the sales team. And that drives me bonkers.
I call salespeople. In fact, just earlier today on 2 calls, I was talking to this chief customer officer and then chief marketing officer, and it was 2 different calls, same groups of people. And I called them, and I didn't know what I was doing. I kept referring to sales as wild animals, and they kept, they kind of are, man. They're wild animals. Anyway.
Well, and the difference is they're thinking about the quarter, they're thinking about mid-year, and they're thinking about in totality for the year what quota that they have to hit. That's not to say marketing's not, but marketing is 2-3 years out. We're building future pipeline for the organization. And I like to say, Jeremy, that today's brand is tomorrow's demand. And so you got to make sure that you continue to build up your brand, because that's going to be important for when somebody is in market looking for a solution that you have to provide. And so, when we become too heavily weighted towards supporting sales on demand gen, then what tends to get cut is the brand building and the positioning work that's going to set you up to succeed in year 2, year 3. And so I feel like I'm constantly hitting that, beating that drum in terms of you can't cut the long term, because then you won't have your future there. So what is the role of marketing? I think it's a couple of things. One is to really understand the marketplace and bring those insights so that you're constantly thinking about what are the requirements for your product that's going to meet a need for a customer. Whether they realize that they have that need or not, it will come up. I think it's making sure that you understand who are going to be your best users and who is really your ideal client profile. I think sometimes we just go after the entire marketplace without really looking at certain attributes that would make somebody a successful customer of yours. Because not everyone should be a customer of your technology, because they may not get the value and utility out of it that you're going to need in order to sell other customers on it. But we have to have a really, really good pulse on it and be out ahead of sales and understanding that. And that's where the partnership with product is really important. This is why, even at DexCare, my first strategic hire was bringing in product marketing.
Yep.
Product marketing. And it is one of those things that is one of the most difficult, or I would say that people have a very deep lack of understanding as to what product marketing does. They're not just creating sales enablement content. They actually are looking at what are the requirements, what are customers saying, how do we feed that back, How do we go out and make sure that we're constantly knowing what our competitors are doing? Not that you want to get sidetracked by that necessarily, but and then how do you really effectively position your solution? There's got to be really good product market fit, and they help ensure that there is. And how do you properly position that? Because we know even in healthcare, I mean, when I came back after 5 years of being out of it, I'm like, who are all of these new players, these new market entrants? I mean, the sheer volume of technology companies that are new entrants. You know, I don't have anything to substantiate this, but I would say it's like threefold increase. But you're constantly having to break through because we all sound kind of similar in what we position. And so unless you really have that dialed in, it makes it difficult. Because the one thing that we're lacking right now is clarity as to what all of these different companies are doing and providing. That's product marketing. And that's really important because if you don't have that dialed in, then downstream into your marketing teams and your sales teams are going to make it very difficult for them to be successful in breaking through all of the noise on that. So that's one. And then, of course, you want to make sure that not all channels are created equal. And so you need to make sure that you know where your buyers are and where they go to get information. And in healthcare, it is particularly interesting because I think this is where I go back to my old school ways. And that is simply they talk to each other. So your customers need to be singing your praises in a very authentic way. You want them talking about you. Every marketer is going to say that's true of their product, but I would say in healthcare, it is that times 10, the importance of it. And then using their stories to then feed out into the different channels. We have to remember that, especially in our industry, you've got hundreds, if not thousands of companies vying for the same attention of the same buyers. And you got to be able to break through. The way to break through is they're going to go to their peers.
Yeah, it's very true. Sales-driven marketing is tactical. There's no strategy at all because I'd say maybe 5% of salespeople, like the best, are very strategic, very, very, very strategic. The rest are, they're wild animals.
Yeah,
it's what can I eat and kill right now? What can I eat, kill right? And you can't have. That's why I call marketing adult supervision. They've got to look at the strategy, and I love what you said. I mean, that is genius. Like today's brand is tomorrow's brand. I mean, demand.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have that long-term vision. And so the CEO, a smart CEO, hires the right CMO, chief marketing officer, and empowers that person in a very, very strategic way where it has big influence over product. You have to. It isn't. You're not going to come in and say, we got to switch to this kind of database. So we got to do that. No, heck no. But you're just saying, hey, here's where our customer segmented demand is. Here's where the market segmented demand is. Do we know who we are? And I think that's where another thing that chief marketing officers can really help the CEO with is, do we know who we are? Truly who we are? What is our culture? And then how do we map what we are to our analog in our target markets? That is one thing Epic did better than anybody of their competitor space. They knew exactly who they were and exactly who they wanted to win, and then they helped the government make it happen. Sorry, just kidding. Just kidding.
That's not me.
Yes. No, but even if they did, which they probably did, that's not a bad on Epic. Epic isn't supposed to. And this is. I'm not getting upset with you. I'm getting upset just with a general thing. Like Epic doesn't owe anyone an explanation, right? Like they did what was best for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So the whole thing is.
I mean, if I take it back to let's go back in time. Why was IDX so successful? Is they had that really dialed in. Not only that is really you had a lot of customer champions. Yep. I remember sitting in meetings when we had our physician advisory group that would meet every quarter. We had Stanford, Mayo, Park Nicollet, Lehigh Valley, like this brain trust of people in a room. But you know what? They were our advocates, and we allowed them to lead a lot of those meetings and to lead the charge of these customer communities because it was authentic. I know we like to say that those are new and novel. No, we were doing that, and it was very, very effective in creating kind of that groundswell of word of mouth, if you will. And, our reference program was we spent a lot of time and energy building a very solid one because we knew that mattered. And I always attribute, besides having really good leaders and having good products, we have to remember we had really good products, but we were up against, Epic and Cerner and McKesson and Siemens and Meditech and all of the usual suspects. And there wasn't a lot of differentiation on product. And so you had to differentiate. There was some, I shouldn't say that. Some products were better at certain capabilities and features, but you largely had to compete on customer sentiment and service. As one CIO told me when I was doing some brand research for IDX right before the GE acquisition, he said, it's a marriage. And that always stuck with me. I still have that research, by the way. And that always stuck with me because then you start thinking of it from the standpoint of the ebbs and flows of a relationship and who's going to be there for you when it kind of starts to go sour and bringing it back up. How do you have good conversations? How do you receive feedback? All of those things. But IDX had such this, I'm not saying it's a cult, but our customers felt such a strong affinity towards the organization and the success that they would have if they helped to guide us in the right way. And we were very receptive to it.
And I mean, Epic has a cult. They do.
Yeah.
Or marriage, or however you want to put it. I mean, they do. They have people that will defend, they don't even want to hear the truth sometimes.
Well, they made an investment, so they got to make sure it works.
Yeah, so you do it. It's a massive cost, and so you're going to defend it. You're going to try to make it work. It's like, hey, we're into this thing so big. But Epic's done better job than the rest of their competitors, direct competitors, at engendering trust. It's not, they didn't win because their tech was some sort of order of magnitude better than anyone else. Is just, hey, if we say it's going to go live at a certain time, it's going to be pretty close to the mark. If you say an upgrade is going to happen at a certain time, it's going to be pretty close to the mark. If there's a big problem and we say we'll be out there same day or whatever, they're pretty good at it. The issue is like Cerner's and Siemens, et cetera, they didn't do that.
Yeah.
They didn't hit timelines. They didn't send an army of people to solve it. And so that was, and then like you said, people talked. So those Epic sites were like, what do you mean they told you they wouldn't be out there till Monday? We had over Thanksgiving, Epic sent 10 people out to our shop.
Right.
What? Those stories play, as you know.
They do play.
Earlier.
The other thing, though, that I think has worked in their, especially back then, is they won the hearts and minds of the physicians, which is interesting to say now because
that ain't the truth anymore.
But they started there.
They did.
And I think Cerner had like nursing workflow really, they won that. And Epic went after the physicians. And then of course, they started working into inpatient. And I think the other is they pretty much said, this is how you need to implement. They knew that the implementation of their technology around both people and process and workflow would yield a better outcome, and they drove that and almost forced that into their.
It makes sense. They're a benevolent dictatorship, but there was method behind the madness, so to speak, because of what you mentioned, and also not having tons of different customers on different versions. They just say, no, you have to this year. You have no option. We're not supporting the old one. You have to go here or you will pay through the nose. Like you had so many different vendors where it's, they're on this version, like Allscripts went through that. And Eclipsys, where they have all these different versions they're trying to take. I don't know how you'd even herd all those cats. And Epic's like, no, you're all going to have to do that kind of stuff. And it works, right?
It works. Mm-hmm.
So, kudos to them, but it is really, really fascinating to see that, like you talked about with trust, how super important that is. And customers, they do talk. So ascertaining your customer sentiment and making sure that you're dealing with everything appropriately. And that has to be, my opinion, domain of marketing. Marketing has to be involved with customer success, customer service. Really.
And I can say that I am very much. In fact, we launched a customer advisory board early last year, and it's co-led by both me and our chief customer officer. And so that ensures that you've got two people who are hyper focused on the customer experience and their success, driving that and driving the right conversations. We pull in product, we pull in others, but that way we keep it very strategic, a balance of what are we doing the next 3 years? If you were in our position, which partnerships make sense, just making them feel like they're an extension of your own company and that they have a say in the future direction of it because they've made an investment. And when you do that, I think they feel even more committed to it. I've seen that time and time again, whether it was at IDX or FCI Solutions before they got acquired by R1 or even at DexCare. That seems to be the way to really run those.
Well, what's interesting is that we have a lot of companies on our platform, and I went back and was doing an analysis last week or just doing a review. I'm like, it's amazing how many of our customer programs are running through our platform are actually led by marketing as opposed to the customer success or account management teams. And I went through, I'm like, that is so weird to me. I mean, but then I started looking at it, and then I looked at the background of most of the people that are heads of customer success, and they're tech support people. They're customer support people. So they're very tactical on, and marketing usually brings us in, and there's pushback from, the customer success to say, no, we're already getting like NPS, whatever. But then the head of marketing is like, well, no, the NPS is after trouble ticket. That's not strategic. We're not getting leadership. We're doing it too much. Like every time someone does the tech support, we're not GE or Siemens. Why in the world are you sending out here's another survey, pop, pop, pop? Like, no. So marketing comes in and says, we got to have a real voice of customer program. We'll give you all the analytics, all the insights, you get all the alerts, whatever, but marketing takes it over. And that was a fascinating thing I'd never thought of till last week. Like, why is marketing leading the show on so much of this stuff, as opposed to the people who are supposed to be doing it?
Yeah. Well, I like to do it in partnership with the folks on the customer experience side.
Yeah.
Because then they get to hear the recipients of some of that work and that information too.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we're running out of time. Is there anything cool you're seeing or anything that we really should be talking about that we just haven't talked about?
I think there's a lot of cool things, but people aren't buying cool. They're buying what is solving a problem. And that kind of gets into, now we've got all of these new market entrants, and they're coming in because the silver bullet is not delivering everything that is necessary to run a health system, and is allowing health systems to adapt based on kind of how consumers, patients, consumers, whatever we want to, how they expect to get and receive care. Because
they should be treating them as consumers. That's a pivot that has to happen. That's a mindset that hospitals and clinics have to undergo.
Yeah, because
they have to see them as consumers.
Right, because we've got new demographics of consumers who are not loyal to a health system. Oftentimes, they're just looking to get same-day care or routine care taken care of. And it's become much more competitive for them. So there is that. One thing that will never change is the relationship, though, between the patient and the doctor. That trust has to always be cemented. But I'm optimistic about the different companies that have emerged to solve problems that EMR vendors have not. Again, having worked for one, I know what the cracks are in those technologies and what they don't. They were designed to operate within the walls of a health system. And care is not just within the walls of a health system. It extends out into communities. It extends into your home. So how do we make that experience really, really, how do we make it work? How do we optimize it for our consumers? Because if you don't, they have so many choices. They have a lot more choices than we had even 10 years ago. So it's been interesting to see what those choices and how those choices have emerged, which gets me to another thing, which comes back to just some of the basics around this is, in order for these new market entrants to get it right, and I think that they're optimistic about what the problems that they're solving is, they have to be very, very clear as to what they are solving, and that there is actually a market fit. And that comes by way of, you've got early adopters. You might have health systems that have venture arms and they're investing in you, but you have to be very clear, because when you say I'm a digital front door company, okay, well, welcome to a crowd of 1,000 other vendors out there. They want to know that you're solving a problem. The other is, again, having that cohort of customers that are getting value and being hyper-focused, that they are getting value so that they go out and they talk about it. And then the point of differentiation. I know we talk a lot about that, but if you are not claiming space, that white space that exists, that happens to matter, that can completely change the value that they're receiving, you have to understand the points of differentiation that your product, because that's where you have to start distancing yourselves from the claims that the EMR vendor or the core technology, it's not just EMR, it's others too, are claiming to own and operate and want to kind of take a lock hold on. And so with these new emergence, those three things, absolutely, the clarity, the customers, the product market fit, and the differentiation that comes with that has to be intact for that. Because you're always going to have, it's crowded. We know that. We know that there's always going to be the big monolithic systems that you're going to have to kind of navigate around, and they do make it difficult. And then also you're vying for budget. You're vying for budget.
Yeah.
And if you're not a line item on that budget, you have to work even harder to prove what you have is something that should be added to their budget and their list of priorities. Again, they have 50 million other priorities going on. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but let's just say 50 other projects going on, review boards because of this issue that just happened. And so you're trying to squeeze yourself into that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's differentiation is a huge issue. I get pinged all the time by all these AI startups and digital health and virtual. I was on with one today, a virtual nurse system or whatever. And the problem is, and they always give me a pitch, and I'm happy to do it. Like, I love talking to new companies. And the problem is, I tell them, most of them, like, I don't get why anyone should look at you. Like, I don't see differentiation. Well, you got to understand, we got LLM, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, how awesome. You're describing the plumbing.
Right. That means, right.
Like, you're not differentiating. You're not, what is the problem that you are solving in that specific instance? Because they're not an enterprise, right? They don't do many things. Most of them don't have portfolios as broad as DexCare. They just don't, right? So I'm like, what are you solving? How are you increasing top line or bottom line? How's the improvement? How's, material quality improvement? How are you going to do it within the existing workflow? They have to log out through the systems, et cetera. And it's like I'm speaking like a foreign language to them. They don't know what I'm saying. And it's because they've raised so much money through venture capital, and their marketing and branding, their decks look like VC decks. Like, they're still pitching it. Like, that doesn't, VCs are going to get really distracted with the shiny new toy of your tech.
Mm-hmm.
They can go nuts. But over here, that's not the case. Like, when you're in healthcare now, that it does not going to resonate. It doesn't differentiate. I can tell you, if I don't get what you're saying, guaranteed, these super busy people that are very distracted with mission critical life and death things that happen at their institution, it's not going to resonate anymore.
Right. Well, and the other thing to that too, Jeremy, is that when you do have an opportunity to talk to a prospective customer, you better know something about them already and personalize the conversation of what you know about them, because otherwise you're wasting their time. It's one thing, and I'm not trying to contradict myself. You do have to have customer evidence to show that other systems that have implemented your solution is getting actual real value, whether it's clinical value, financial value, satisfaction, whatever it might be. It's all good and dandy, but how do you take that and personalize it to the health system that you're building the relationship with? And there's enough market data out there that you can do that. If you can show them, it's this show me, don't just tell me, show me, because it's an industry that's largely been oversold to, and they're wary and they're skeptical about what people say, and you've got to earn their trust. And earn their trust is I know you, I see you, let me present this within your own environment, and you got to work a little harder in doing that. Make it real for them.
100%. Absolutely. Anything else we didn't cover? I've super enjoyed this. I probably put you to sleep a couple times with my rants, but anything else we should cover? I love it. Anything about any new cool stuff coming up from DexCare?
We have
what should we be looking out for?
We have some really great features coming out in DexCare that are really, really focused on how do we optimize capacity within a health system. I think oftentimes health systems will say they don't have capacity, and we can look at their data and go, actually, you do. You just don't know how to effectively, merchandise that capacity that you have, or navigate patients to the right care venues. And so we're doing that today, but we're really focused on how do we do that even better for our customers. So we make it easier for them to manage the supply and demand of care for their patients.
That's awesome. So we'll put a link in the details to your LinkedIn.
Okay.
We'll put one too. Should we do about us at the DexCare, or you can send us anywhere you want us to go about DexCare, and then any other things you want us to follow, we'll actually put it in the details, in the show notes, or whatever they call it.
Show notes.
Yeah.
Show notes.
Cool. Jamie, as always, this was a real pleasure. See you at HIMSS for sure, but we'll talk in the meantime. But I really, really, really appreciate the time today.
Yeah, you too, Jeremy. Always good to catch up.
All right. See you, Jamie.
Bye.